Welcome, everybody, to episode 45 of the Career Talks podcast. I'm your host, Orlando Haynes, and I'm excited for this one here. Yeah, this is going to be a powerhouse. If you're not, as you tuning in, please get pens and pads ready. If you've seen the title, it says "Accelerating Your Promotion." If you're a 9 to 5er, this is what you're needing in this current time. But before we jump into that, just want to say thank you to tonight's sponsor, which is Agape Career Counseling Group, led by a good friend of mine, Deborah Russell. She does HR, small business consulting, and supporting those who are looking to find the careers they love. So you can find her information at agapeccg.com, and you'll see the link post this phenomenal episode. So I have Miss Tiffany Uman, all the way from Montreal, Canada. I'm not sure if you know who she is. You should. If you're not following her on IG, she has a massive following of over 50,000 followers, just dropping gems upon gems upon gems of content for folks that are needing help from all areas in a different perspective when it comes to career growth. So she is the founder of TiffanyUman.com. Also, she's a speaker. Along with that, she is the co-author of a newly published book called Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier: Living Your Career Potential. Let me welcome my new friend. She is super hilarious, Miss Tiffany Uman, to the platform. Welcome.
Yes, Orlando, what a welcome. Thank you so much. And I'll preface my voice is a little bit in and out today, but that's not going to stop us from dropping some gems tonight. So I'm really excited to be here.
Super excited that you can join me. We've chatted probably a bunch of times leading up to tonight. So, and like I said, I feel like I know you. I know this relationship is gonna grow. We're gonna do some more things, and I'm excited for that. But share with folks who you are and more about what you do.
Sure. So, my name is Tiffany Uman. I am a career strategy coach. My mission is all about empowering ambitious professionals from all around the world to ultimately fast track your career success, whether that is landing new promotions, securing those salary raises, landing new job opportunities, and everything in between, right? From building up your personal brand, your confidence, the right mindset, mastering your communication, and of course, always keeping your well-being top priority, because if you don't work, your career doesn't work, and you have to really be able to keep that top of mind and thrive at the same time. In terms of my background, I've been in the corporate Fortune 500 space for over 13 years. So a lot of the insights and knowledge that I bring in this area are very much inspired by my own journey of fast tracking my own growth. And I love paying it forward to this incredible generation of talent from all around the world to be able to take full control of their career success.
Let's go. Awesome. Awesome. So, again, I'll continue to say it. Definitely excited to have you on and share your expertise. And I just love doing these and finding new connections, new partnerships, and really advice, right? Going forward. So, accelerating really accelerating promotion. What's the program that you have too?
Yes. So my signature program is called Career Success Fast Track. So it's fairly explicit in that sense, where it's about helping you take that control of your career success and ultimately break down roadblocks standing in your way from getting you from your point A to point B. And the beauty of it is that that point B could look different for everyone. But I love helping to clear out the clutter and focus in on what's going to make the biggest difference for you in advancing your career.
Awesome, awesome. So, folks, again, as you're tuning in, say hello. Let us know where you're coming in from. I want to shout out in the last podcast you were on that I've seen was Sonal, right? Is that how you pronounce her name?
Yes.
And the
So
reason
no.
Sonal, and I want to do that because that conversation was very dynamic as well. So I want to give credit where credit's due. Definitely follow her as well, and
Yeah,
follow
she's
Tiffany.
wonderful. She's
Awesome.
wonderful.
So share with us, let's go back a bit. Share with us your own personal journey, being in corporate America in that accelerated growth that you've had. And then we'll dive into the transition.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I really started from the bottom. I mean, I'm the kind of route that when you finish your college studies and have a dream role, I mean, I was really fortunate to get into my dream organization right out of my college studies. And so it started from the very early stages as essentially an intern, but a full-time intern with a bit of a rotational program. And I really grew up the ranks from a marketing career path, most oriented. So of course I had other facets to it, but it was primarily a marketing driven career path. And I love marketing. So it was something that felt really natural to me. And I started from very junior levels all the way up to senior marketing director for the number one beauty company in the world, and had a lot of amazing projects and opportunities throughout that time. What inspired me a lot, though, Orlando, in becoming a career strategy coach for my career is that there's really a lot that school doesn't prepare you for. I think we'd all like to think that, okay, we graduate, we're ready to take on the world. And then, no one gives you a handbook on how to navigate the corporate world. No one gives you that handbook on how to really handle those internal politics or the relationship building side of things. And it's hard to sometimes have that confidence level that's needed to really excel in your growth when you're surrounded by so many incredible people, right? So I think that's just a big part of it, of wanting to make sure that I'm able to pay it forward to this next generation. I certainly made a lot of mistakes along the way. I had a lot of struggles, especially early on, that I kind of learned the hard way in that sense. So I really want to help others not have to go through those same types of struggles and put the cards on their side, whatever their career path might be, function, industry, etc., so that they can get the kind of growth that they're looking for, whether it's in one current organization or possibly different organizations along the way, doing entire career pivots. I mean, there's no rules when it comes to career growth, but it's certainly inspired by the track that I've had and a lot of the best practices that I've established for myself that have helped me to land 7 promotions in under 10 years. And so now I'm all about really helping others to use those methods in the way that they see fit to get to their goals faster.
7 promotions within 10 years. So great segue to the question is, what did you pull from that led you to creating your signature program to where now you're helping folks?
Yeah, 100%. So I would say there's really 4 core themes that I love diving deeper into, but I'll summarize it for our listeners today. The first is all around fueling a career growth mindset. I mean, I often say this, Orlando, that your mindset can be your biggest asset or liability in your career. And I always want it to be the former. And so tied with that is obviously confidence, right? Getting past self-doubt, imposter syndrome. Those things just are only going to hold you back in what you're capable of achieving. And the more we feed into those negative thoughts, the more it can really take away from what you're capable of achieving. Hand in hand with that is the clarity aspect, right? I often say that, goals without action are simply ideas. So we need to make sure that we're providing the right level of strategic and intentional action to get you to where you want to go. I mean, a perfect example of this is often thinking what we're working on is what's going to help us get to that next step, when in reality, it's not that at all. And so that kind of leads to the second pillar that I love focusing on that's helped me tremendously in my growth, which is personal branding. And, we talk about this, we hear about this term a lot. The approach I love taking is how to really leverage something like a really incredible personal brand within your actual roles, and how that will actually facilitate beyond just doing very good work, right? Your work will only take you so far in many cases. So the personal brand helps bring a lot of other facets together around relationship building, exposure, visibility, leadership, right? These are the kinds of things that are going to help position you very much as a top talent. And that leads into the third focus that was a huge, huge momentum changer and game changer for me, which is mastering communication. I mean, you've probably seen this too, Orlando, but communication can make or break a lot of instances in your career, not just the day-to-day ones, but also towards your career goals. So, whether it's about managing those internal politics, right? Managing up properly with your boss and management team, how you put yourself forward, or really being in control of the perception that others have of you. Public speaking overall, to be able to put your best foot forward in all kind of work settings. And ultimately, I would say really helping you to take control of your career path dialogues and advocating for yourself effectively. That is a hugely important one that, we can't just let our work speak for itself. That might lead to a very passive route when it comes to career advancement. And then I would say the fourth and final focus that's really helped, and I would say this is probably the most important learning that I had, Orlando, over my years, and something that I did very badly at the beginning, in full transparency, is work-life balance and
Yeah.
really prioritizing my well-being. I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners could probably relate in being in that need to prove myself mindset, or just putting in a lot of the long hours to showcase that you have what it takes to advance. But that's just not a sustainable strategy. So I really love bringing the attention there also, and know that you can have other priorities outside of work. You know, you could have a personal life, you could have a family, you can do all of these things and still thrive in your career when you're focusing your energy on what actually makes the biggest difference. So I would really summarize it into those four facets, which are exactly a lot of the themes I dive a lot deeper into in my signature program.
Love it. Love it. So much to unpack. I'm going to dive around a little bit
Sure.
because one of the things you said was interesting, and I wanted to understand your mindset when you said that. You said your career dialogue. So unpack that a bit. What do you mean by career dialogue?
Yeah. So I'll frame it in this way, right? I think most of us who are in a corporate setting, but even sometimes outside of corporate settings, will have performance reviews, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
obviously, companies place a lot of emphasis on that, as they typically are those key moments of career decisions. But when I talk about career dialogue, it means that there's a lot more beyond just those performance reviews. There's a level of proactivity that I encourage, my clients and everyone really to take in spearheading these types of conversations, and leading the type of dialogue that's needed to get you to your next steps. It goes a little to what I was saying earlier, Orlando, about controlling that perception factor, or sometimes working on things that you think are going to get you to your next step, but actually aren't really the things you needed to focus on.
Hmm.
And when we're not taking ownership of having those career conversations around progression, what does that look like, and what's needed to get you to that next level, it can lead you to focus precious time and energy in areas that just aren't going to actually help you get there by the time that you want. And then that leads to what I like to call blind spots, or key
Hmm.
gaps that will keep you feeling probably a little bit frustrated or stagnant, or a little bit stuck in your roles without really understanding why. Why am I not moving at the rate that I want? I see people moving around me. What am I not doing? And that again can really create and fuel a negative mindset that will only impact your confidence in a bad way. So that's kind of what I mean by the career dialogues, of that level of ownership and spearheading these types of conversations instead of just waiting for them to happen.
Love it. Love it. So
Yeah.
let me jump back up to the top because you said career mindset and clarity. Now, there's folks that can share different versions of what they mean by career mindset, but I want to hear it from you. What's your take when it comes to the importance of career mindset?
Oh, yeah. My stance is that you really need to be your own biggest cheerleader in your career. And if you're not believing in yourself, and that's very much tied with the mindset and self-confidence, self-belief,
Hmm.
self-trust, it's directly, either consciously or subconsciously, going to impact your behaviors and the actions that follow through. The dangerous part is when it's the subconscious. And this is why, when we talk about limiting beliefs, sometimes these are things that we're holding on to, sometimes even deeply rooted, that we don't even realize have the weight that it's carrying over us in how we are going about our actions. So for me, it's very much about that aspect, and making sure that you believe in yourself and what you're capable of, and breaking down roadblocks that might be standing in your way, and a lot of the mental roadblocks that tend to stand in our way, so that you can clear that clutter and get faster towards where you want to go.
Awesome. So now we talked about this offline about both our passions for personal branding and how that lends itself to accelerating your promotion. Let's dive into that, right?
Yeah.
How, what's your take? What does that look like, and how does that? It's like a three-part lengthy question, but how does that support the acceleration of your promotion? And then we'll get a little more granular as we go along.
Yeah. I'll say that the key thing, and the real sign of having a very strong personal brand, is when people are speaking highly of you when you're not even there. I mean,
Hmm.
think of it this way. An analogy I like to reference often is, and I come from the marketing background, so I always like this one when we're managing brands, right? think about any brand that you use, that you buy, there's likely certain words that come to mind when we think about that brand, right? A
Mhm.
brand like a Nike, a brand like a Coca-Cola, a sports brand, whatever it is that we're thinking of, there's certain attributes that we associate with that brand. So the way I view it is that your personal brand is very similar in that way. And the more level of intention and strategy you bring to building it effectively, the more it can help you in the visibility, exposure, recognition, and relationships that you're creating within your organizations. And this is the aspect that really goes beyond just doing a basic work. I mean, you could be the best worker out there, but if the right people aren't really recognizing that, right? If you're not really tapping into the key decision makers who can influence your career growth decisions, it's kind of falling on deaf ears in that way. And you could be putting so much energy and effort into this, and it's not really following through in the way that you hope. So that's very much how I perceive the personal branding aspect, and how it also will help you so much in building up your leadership capabilities and positioning yourself as the top talent, not just now, but really at every stage of your career,
Mhm.
especially when you're doing a great job at building up the right kind of supporters in your corner. These are the types of things that will just add at every stage. It's not like a stop and stop where you work on personal branding one day and then you're done and that's finished. It's a constant evolution. And the beauty of it, Orlando, and the way I typically view it, is that your personal brand evolves as you evolve. Like, I can tell you, for me, my personal brand was very different when I was starting out in my career versus the mid stage and the later stages of my corporate career. And that's the fun of it, where you can add and tweak and prioritize certain things about it that will help you towards your advancement goals.
I love that. So, for folks that are not confident, right? Because you said that earlier at the top of the conversation, with folks that confidence is key for it. So, for folks that lack a little bit of confidence in how can they build those relationships, right?
Yeah.
How can they build those relationships internally that will start to put them forward as a thought leader or SME in their current role? How do you educate or empower those type of employees that have
Yeah.
the skill set but just lack the confidence?
Yeah. I mean, I often recommend, start small and build, because the lack of confidence in the relationship building is likely stemming from possibly an intimidation factor or an overwhelm factor, not really knowing, how am I going to forge those types of connections for myself? And when you feel like, okay, I need to build connections with so many different people, it can be very stressful. So I like recommending, starting with the level that you feel comfortable with. I mean, your boss is obviously a very important stakeholder to have a solid dynamic with. And then you could almost bridge out from there to identify maybe people within your extended team, support teams, maybe more vertically in your path of growth within your function. And ultimately believe in yourself, because as you said, Orlando, you have the skills, you have the
Mhm.
competencies, and you're doing the work already. So it's almost just kind of giving us that jolt that, we're doing ourselves a disservice by not allowing others to recognize what we do and learn from us directly. I think this comes back to the proactivity piece I was mentioning, where, yes, your boss is going to hopefully be a supporter for you in your career, but I'm a big advocate of helping you, for one, create those dynamic and those relationships firsthand, right? It's a
Mhm.
very different for, let's say, HR to hear about you through your manager or your manager's manager versus you talking to them directly. Like, that's a very different dynamic.
Mhm.
And it's going to be hard for people that aren't you to express who you are and what you want and the motivations you have in the words that you would normally state for yourself. So when it comes to that confidence, it's really about knowing that people are there to support you, that people aren't out to get you typically. I mean, we could talk about toxic work environments. That's a little bit of a different theme for tonight, but obviously there's exceptions to the rule, but generally, the plan is to grow within your
Mhm.
career. So you want to lean into that and build up that confidence that you have in your skills to show, hey, I can showcase this to other people, and start small. Build off of actions that are almost just a natural extension of what you're doing. I'll give a really quick example.
Yep.
Let's say, you're working on a project, and it's something that, your boss suggests that they present on your behalf to their manager. Well, maybe you decide to step in and say, hey, you know what? Is this something that I can maybe share? It's something that I've been working on, for quite some time. I'd love to maybe get that kind of exposure to so and so. And that's going to give you that confidence. It might feel a little uncomfortable. Every kind of moment where you're getting out of your comfort zone is going to feel a little bit uneasy, but it's like the ripping off of the band-aid that needs to happen. And I'll end off with this point, Orlando, which is
Hmm.
that sometimes we feel like we need to feel confident to take action, but it's actually by taking action that's going to build the confidence. So the longer that we keep ourselves from taking the action, the confidence is just going to feel very stagnant. We need to prompt the needed action to build up the confidence, get ourselves a little bit in the limelight, and then grow from there.
Love it. Love it. You actually answered the next question that I was having. It was to give someone really kind of a practical advice. And
Mhm.
what does that language look like? So that was great. So the follow up to that was, because you mentioned two things: is one, to have a conversation with their manager,
Yeah.
or basically have a skip level conversation. What would that language look like? Because that's more, and again, for those that maybe are confident but just like, should I or shouldn't I, or and the ones that are just not confident, how should they approach that? What are the steps? Is it X before Y? Is it Z before A? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, the skip level communication is a little bit of a tricky one. And
Hmm.
this definitely depends at what stage of career you're at. But I would say if, let's say, you're someone a little bit more junior in your career, that going above, let's say, your primary manager to speak to your manager's manager, you can absolutely do it, but you need to be a little bit careful how you go about it because you don't want to make it seem like you're overstepping your boss or that your boss isn't supporting you in certain areas. And whether we like it or not, your boss and the boss's boss are going to talk to each other. So it's almost better to kind of get insight first from your manager and say,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, look, I realize I haven't really spoken to so and so very much in my role, or maybe because we're in a remote setting, things are a little bit more distant, whatever it might be. And I'd love to maybe have an opportunity coming up that would allow me to share more directly with them and have them hear from me more directly versus through you as it might have been in the past. Is this something that we can work towards for the next meeting, and then fill in the name of the meeting, whatever it is? So you
Hmm.
you, you want to almost create these suggestions and recommendations that your boss can get behind and then support you. And then like this, you're involving your boss. They're not blindsided. They're able to really understand where you're coming from and the motivations as to why you want to have those types of conversations or exposure. And it's going to be a lot more collaborative than feeling like you have to almost go behind the scenes and overstep your boss. That might actually backfire.
Hmm.
um, Now, of course, if you're more senior in your career, you might not necessarily need to do that if you've already forged some of these initial relationships and now it's just about building them and nurturing them and growing them. And so in that case, I often recommend maybe piggybacking off of a relevant recent meeting or context where that senior leader, as an example, was maybe having an initial presentation, or using that as a good segue to follow up with one-to-one conversations, building off of what they shared in that
Mm.
meeting. It's something that's going to be in that person's consideration set already. They're probably going to appreciate that you've paid attention, that it resonated with you, and then that can allow for a more natural exchange and a back and forth, and let them hear from you directly.
I love that because I'm going to say it a little different. Now that so in essence, you're in the room, right? So during the presentation, whatever that, you're at the table, you're in the room, and now you leverage that opportunity to say, hey, Mr. Such and Such, Mrs. Such and Such, can we talk post this conversation about some ideas or some things that you shared or that I might have shared. That's really good. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a great because again, you're visible, right? You're not coming out of left field and I'm like, who's Orlando? Who's Tiffany? Who do they work for? Why are they asking
Yeah.
to speak with
What,
me?
what what's happening right now?
Yeah, what's going on? So, but that's good. I hope folks like write that one down for sure. You
Yeah.
because it's so crucial because you skipped so many steps. The fact that you're in the room,
Yeah.
right? That immediately gives you credibility at some level, right? In performance and your role and your expertise or something that you're invited to that meeting that it's important for you to be there for you to learn or whatever. But then you leverage that
Yeah.
beyond that. That's really strategic thinking there.
Yeah. And
There we
it's
go.
ultimately bringing forward that proactivity that I mentioned
Hmm.
before, right? Where instead of just waiting for this opportunity to pass you by, you're creating an opportunity,
Yep.
and you're leveraging something that's already something they're thinking about, that might be a hot topic, something that they obviously are passionate about, as your gateway into a follow-up conversation. And it's going to feel a lot more natural than, like, to your point, Orlando, just coming left field with a random meeting invite, and then they're like, I don't understand what this meeting is for. And then that might create a little bit more awkwardness or tension when you're actually meeting that individual.
Correct. Correct. So you mentioned work-life balance.
Hmm.
Is there, right? This has been a hot topic for a while.
It sure is.
Is there such a thing, right? Is work-life balance while trying to accelerate your promotion? Do the two coexist?
Oh my
Or can it?
gosh.
Can it? Can
Yes,
they?
they can. Honestly, Orlando, I see this with my clients every day, and
Okay.
it's a really empowering and liberating thing, especially as a coach, to see that transformation happen. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that, I've witnessed this for myself, and I see it with people that I work with, that, we go in with the mindset that we need to be that yes person. We just need to take everything on. We can't say
Hmm.
no. We have to demonstrate that we can do it all. When in reality, reinforcing the right boundaries helps you to be a lot more strategic and focused in what you do put your attention towards. And that actually can warrant and grant you so much more respect and trust from others. It shows that you don't have to spread yourself thin, that you can really level up in the demands that are coming your way and the responsibilities that you're managing. And why this is so important is that as you grow in your career, you're only going to get more demands on your shoulders. It's only going to be more intense. So if you're not building these skills early enough on, it's going to have a pretty unsustainable path forward, and
Hmm.
where you feel like you're burning the candle at both ends. Whereas if you're setting the right precedent and focusing your energy on the right areas and voicing, different opportunities, different recommendations of how to maybe reorient the priorities, how to rework the workload in a way that's not compromising the business needs, but also allowing you to not compromise your own well-being, I guarantee you, and for all of our listeners, I guarantee that you are going to be able to show up as your best self. It's very hard to show up as your best self in your work when you are not being able to put your best self forward for you. And so the company is probably not getting the best version of you. You're not getting the best version of yourself. Your family is probably not seeing the best version. So it creates this very negative
Mm.
spiral, even though in our mind we might be convincing ourselves that, no, I just gotta, this is just a rough time, or it's just a busy moment. I need to just do it. I need to do it. And of course, there's going to be exceptions to the rule. I think every organization is going to have those moments of the year that can tend to be a little bit more intense than others. But so long as it remains the exception to the rule and not like the ongoing dynamic where it's just constant workload, it's actually going to serve you a lot better to show how you can prioritize yourself, focus your energy a lot more strategically on what's going to drive the biggest difference for the business needs. And it's going to help you as an individual create more time and space for the things that are going to help you in terms of your advancement overall. So, yes, they absolutely can coexist. Not always intuitive to do, which is why I love focusing on this, but it absolutely does coexist.
So here's a great segue, and I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit, but it'll come to you the moment I ask the question. In your IG, one of your IG posts, you shared a great way to say no.
Mm,
So how saying no does help you, because you went into, you think we got to say yes and we're taking all these things on, and then at that point we fail probably to execute because we have too much on our plate,
yeah.
knowing that as we ascend higher it's going to come anyway, but people may think, if I can handle it now I should be able to handle it then. It's a different, there's different demands, right, at different levels.
Yeah.
So share with us, one, how saying no helps, and then two, the verbiage. Again, I'm all about the language.
Yeah.
Some of the great terminology you use to say no
Mm.
when folks are trying to pull you five different ways, basically.
Oh, yeah. This is such an important topic. And I would say, especially for female professionals. I
Mm.
mean, I just see the trend. I used to be there as well, where it seems to be a little bit more common amongst us, where it doesn't always come off that we can just push back as easily. And there's sort of two facets to saying no, which I'll talk about to your other point in a second around the verbiage. But why it's important to say no and how this is important is that it sets the right precedent for yourself.
Mm.
The longer you go without creating those boundaries, without creating the right structure that you're going to be able to thrive in and be your best, it's going to work against you, right? We might feel like even when we're starting a new role, I get this a lot with my clients where they're like, but I'm starting a new job. I feel like I just need to like say yes to everything my boss is giving me. And I'm like, yes and no. Like that's really dangerous because you're learning the ropes, you're learning the time it takes to do things. You don't even know yet how long certain tasks can take, and you might be not mismanaging expectations that can create unnecessary frustrations in how you're managing up with your boss. And so if you're setting this precedent right out of the gate, it's better off to be a little bit more realistic with your time management. And if anything, add things on later than over promise and under deliver, which is the type of thing that we all want to avoid. So
Mhm.
it's actually going to help set the right tone. It's going to help set the right kind of boundaries and how you work, why you work in this way, and create a lot more respect overall in terms of the exchanges you're having with your boss and your teams. Now, in terms of saying no, this is what I was saying, that there's sort of two facets
Yeah.
to it, because for sure there's sort of the facet of saying no when you almost just want to push back at the moment because it's things that are being asked of you. And yes, they technically fall in your scope of work, but you cannot take it on right now. So it's more of like a delayed technique to make sure that you're getting to it when you're able to get to it. But then there's also, of course, instances where you do need to really just, it's going to be like a hard pass that this isn't something that you should be doing. And that could definitely fall into things that maybe are outside of your scope of responsibilities, but people are just coming to you because they're maybe taking advantage of you as like a newbie on the team. Or maybe it's something that they just don't want to do themselves. And they're like, hey, Tiffany's going to do it. Let's just ask her. Or maybe it's something that's just very, very tactical and straying you from your own development priorities. So there's definitely context for saying no. Although I'm more of an advocate of not outright saying no as a term, I try to use different verbiage that's a little bit more empathic and collaborative in doing that. But there's going to be those moments where you really need to do a hard pass on what they're asking and set the right boundary and precedent for yourself. So, maybe as an example, right, if we're talking about pushing back, a big thing is to let the person know, whoever's asking you, what they need from you, that you have to let them know what else is on your plate. When people are coming to ask you for something, they have their own priority in mind. They say, hey, I need this from Orlando, I need this now, I'm going to go ask him. But they don't take the time to ask you, what are you working on right now? Hey, do you have the time to take this on? It like rarely comes in that way where they're actually considering your needs. So this is where you need to loop in the other person. And I often say, showing your willingness to help, given that it is something that you genuinely should be taking on, but you just don't have the capacity right now, right? It could be something as simple as, like, thanks for sharing this with me. I appreciate you coming to me with this. That said, I'm actually already prioritizing, XYZ this week, and that's going to take me till the end of Friday. So if this is very time pressed, unfortunately, it's going to have to wait until next week. But I'm happy to set some time together where we can regroup and go from there on Monday. Would that work for you? And you're kind of giving them an alternative proposal to be able to adjust your timetable in the way without feeling like you have to take this on right now. And then, of course, if it's an instance where you really need to push back entirely, that this isn't even something that you should do, you kind of need to address that part. So again, it could be saying something like, thank you for coming to me with this. It certainly sounds like it's pretty time pressed. That said, I'm just at full capacity this week and I simply cannot take it on. And additionally to that, it's something that doesn't necessarily fall within my scope of responsibilities. And then this is where, as the employee, you can share an alternative proposal. Maybe it's someone else on the team that's more the expert in that area, or maybe it's about just drawing the point and the line that this isn't something that I would ever really take on anyways. And then kind of let them know, I hope you can appreciate where I'm coming from on this. And it's just a way of going about it where it's not just like a hard no, like, no, I'm not going to do that. It could rub people the wrong way. And this is my style, Orlando. So I know other people might have different stances on this. I know sometimes like you just got to say no. And if you like doing that and it works for you, go for it. I've just found that this method has worked for me extremely well. It's worked for my clients extremely well. And it helps build a lot more trust and collaboration for future dynamics that are going to happen with those same people versus just being the no person that starts feeling very rigid towards other employees or colleagues that you might be working with.
It's definitely perfectly said in that space, because what I get from it is and again, it also depends on the manager, right? Not to get off topic, but sometimes that manager may misperceive what you're trying to say. You're really just saying, hey, I want to provide the excellence that you need for this project, but right now I can't let something else fall to meet what you're looking for. Basically, is like I have
Yeah.
my plate, which is great.
And can I
But
add something really
yeah,
quickly to that,
absolutely.
Orlando? Just because
Hmm.
you made me think of it. Remember, our managers sometimes forget what we're working on,
Yeah.
right? Like they might totally forget that you were actually already working on something that you talked about with them the week prior,
Hmm.
or maybe they thought that that was already done. So having these types of pushback conversations are important to remind them that, like, hey, I'm actually still working on this. Like, this is taking longer and it is still the priority. So just reminding them of that is an important thing, to not assume that they just know what you're working on at any given time. We often do need to remind our bosses what we're handling in a given moment.
Now, I'm going to say a blanket statement in terms of percentage, right? It could be a high percentage of folks who are absolutely scared to be able to say that in the moment and when it happens. So, what would you suggest as a coach, coaching them and pulling from your own experience, setting expectations prior to? Is that a conversation you would have with your manager in a one-on-one or something like that, saying, "Hey, how do you feel about certain times where this may happen?" Bring up a
Hmm.
scenario. How would that dynamic work between our relationship, or how would
Mm.
that be viewed?
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And I'm a big, big advocate of setting and managing the right expectations. Generally, this is something that I highly recommend doing even when you're starting in a new role. Like, these aren't really the conversations you want to have 6 months in, a year in, 2 years into a role with a manager. Like, this is the kind of thing that right out of the gate, when you're starting a new role, getting a really good feel as to what I like to call where you have permission to kind of go all in, but also where you might need their protection in certain areas on
Hmm.
where they want to be involved. And this is going to help you kind of understand more what their expectations are when it comes to certain facets of your work. And then, of course, to your point, Orlando, you could definitely share examples, like concrete examples of, like, okay, so for instance, for this project, if let's say, I'm working on this and we initially agreed to a certain timeline and I realize a few days in, it's probably going to take me longer. Is this the type of thing that you would want me to flag to you at that point so we can relook deadlines together and better manage upwards to, like, let's say management, if this is going to them or whatnot.
Hmm.
And you could kind of troubleshoot it that way. But you also can handle it in those moments, right? It goes a bit to what I was saying before, that your boss doesn't know what they don't know. And
Right.
so they obviously are looking out for the needs of the business, but also hopefully the well-being of their employees. And so if you're feeling like you have to keep this all to yourself and that you can't talk to them about this, and then it gets to a point where you are backed against a wall, you didn't meet the deadline, you're stressed out of your mind, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've just dug a hole for myself. That's not going to serve you well. And it's not going to serve your manager well, because they're probably going to be like, well, why didn't you bring this up earlier? Like, I could have actually helped you. So this is a big advice I give, is when you are trying to get a gauge of timeline on projects, and maybe it's the first time you're doing it, so you don't really know how long it's going to take, but you agree to a certain deadline and you're already kind of getting a glimpse a little bit into that deadline that might not be the most realistic, raise that. Like, let your boss know. And it doesn't have to be about showing that you're not able to meet the deadline. It's about showing this level of self-awareness in your work, that, hey, this is maybe going to take a little bit longer. Want to give you the heads up. It's something that I'll keep you updated on in the next coming days, but it's possible we might need to relook the end deadline, or if that deadline is really not able to be moved, well, I might need to relook some of the other things that I was planning to get done this week that we had already discussed, or like something like this, right? So again, it's about kind of having that level of control in those conversations than just letting them get the best of you and disappointing your manager, which can create a really negative dynamic over time.
So when it comes to the communication piece, and I'm because I took notes earlier, so I'm jumping up to the points you made. You talked about career dialogue, and let me know if it's kind of a repetitive question, but uh, what else in that communication piece should we know of and be able to execute in for us to accelerate a promotion?
Oh, yeah. I'm glad you brought that back up, Orlando, because there's one facet we didn't talk about yet, which is crucial in the communication part in advancing your career growth, and it is feedback.
Mm,
Feedback. And by the way, this ties a little bit with what we shared earlier around confidence. Sometimes when we're lacking confidence, it's because we don't have the feedback to give us certain validation or alignment towards our goals or what we're working on. And so when we don't have that feedback, it's really challenging because we're just assuming things in our mind.
yep.
We're making judgment calls that, oh, you know what, maybe I'm not doing the right thing, or I haven't heard from so and so, or my boss hasn't updated me on this. And it can make your mind go wild. And so, leveraging feedback in a way that's actually going to help you understand what's missing with where you're at now to where you want to go, getting the proper validation and conversations around this on what needs to happen to get you to your next steps is going to be very enlightening and help support you towards the goals that you want to achieve. And if ever any of our listeners are thinking in the back of their mind, well, what if like I don't really want to get the feedback, or what if I'm nervous like about the feedback I'm going to get? And I've heard that with my clients as well. And I get that. I used to feel that way too. But here's my stance on it. And I hope this helps everybody, which is that by not asking the questions around the feedback doesn't mean that, let's say, your boss isn't thinking it. They're probably
Hmm.
still thinking these same things. But the problem with not asking for the feedback is you're not giving yourself the chance to learn what the feedback is. So you can't even action it. So they're still thinking it, but you're not giving yourself the opportunity to actually take it, develop on that, and improve your chances of accelerating your promotion, securing that next salary raise, right? Maybe exploring a different internal job opportunity.
Hmm.
So it's only going to work in your favor by really leaning into having those types of feedback conversations. And by the way, it goes both ways. Like I love also encouraging and fostering a feedback culture where you're also giving feedback to your manager. Like maybe it's around things that you want more guidance from them on. Maybe it's things that you want to be more involved in. Like this is a perfect moment where it's almost just a two-way dialogue and doesn't have to feel like something really nerve-wracking or intimidating to talk about.
So share with me, and that's very good points. Share if this makes sense as a question. We talked about getting more projects, right? Projects given to us and managing our time and things like that. What about initiating certain
Yeah.
projects? There's gaps you may see in the organization or process or anything like that.
Yeah.
How should we approach those?
Yeah. Well, these are great for these types of conversations because maybe you already have a sense as to certain things that you want to be exposed to that you're not exposed to right now. It
Hmm.
could even be something as simple, Orlando, as like asking you about possible like internal trainings that exist in certain development areas that you want for yourself, and prompting that instead of just waiting for someone to contact you at one point about getting involved in certain trainings, just asking these very poignant but specific questions around your development areas and things that you can do to further support those development areas. These are the types of conversations that, yeah, if you have a great manager, they might initiate these for you, but it doesn't really happen as the norm. And so, initiating that and bringing the recommendation forward, or the ideas forward, or the proposals forward is going to position you really well because then your boss simply needs to align on it with you. You've already almost
Hmm.
done half the work. And then they can just say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Or, okay, let me check into that. Or, you know what? Yeah, I can definitely see that benefiting you. Instead of dumping it all on their shoulders to develop a whole plan for you that maybe they haven't done. And then it doesn't really go anywhere because they have other things on their plate. So the more you could almost support your boss in that way, in managing up and helping them understand where you want to grow and why that's important for you, it's actually going to serve you very, very well in getting the proper alignment to close the gap to that next step.
Got it. Got it. So here's a similar type question: Is is there a high level of importance on not only executing but completing projects? Right.
Hmm.
So there can be where you're executing on projects, but for any reason, funding, time, more high priority comes in and it cuts in. It, do we still add that to our, put a feather in our cap to say, hey, I was getting through 75% of this. but we shifted gears. So now I'm on this
Yeah.
project. Is there a variance in there? Is that anything to consider? What does that look like?
Mm. Well, I mean, I would generally say to include those within
Mm,
your track record because, especially if it's due to circumstantial reasons why you weren't able to follow through on it, like
hmm
budget cuts or a change of strategic direction or a plan that was pulled from maybe the parent company leading down to the subsidiary where you work or whatever it is. It's still something that you've worked on and you've
hmm
probably developed key skills with that, key learnings, maybe key wins, even micro wins along the way. And I think that's an important
Love it.
realization where, yeah, maybe you didn't get to the final outcome, but I guarantee there's things that you achieve that you can really use within your track record until the point that you got to. And we don't want to just write that off, right? Especially if it is due to reasons that were outside of our control. So definitely, it's something that can play into your advancement as well. And it could even, I'll add this, Orlando, play in well when you're showing your ability to be agile, to
Mm,
adapt. Like this could again come back to your personal brand
yep.
and show like some of the things that make you you and set you apart and how you use your personal brand and how you react in certain situations. Like instead of being like, oh my gosh, like it's so frustrating. I've been spending 7 months on this project and now it's not happening anymore. That could be a really negative mindset, but it's also like, okay, well, how do I make this something that's still going to benefit me? And getting a little bit more intentional around how to frame that and how to communicate that is going to make all the difference. Right? We don't always have control on the circumstances, but we have control on how we react to the circumstance. And that's a really important distinction to keep in mind.
That's good. That's good. So wow, time is absolutely flying.
Oh
Jesus.
my gosh, I know. I just took a look too. My voice is
so
still holding out, so this is good. This is good.
so when it comes to let's share with some folks some of the if you can, not too much because I want them to to get into your signature program and accelerate their promotion. But what are some things that we haven't touched on that you can share that you coach your some of your clients on?
Yeah, 100%. I will actually tell you, Orlando, kind of beyond the core themes that I shared, a big part of it is a lot of the situational dynamics that we're in,
Mm,
right? The themes that I talked about are very much tied to the advancement aspect, but believe it or not, a lot of the ways that we handle these micro moments in our day to day add up, right? And it's about creating and seizing opportunities that might not be in front of us. So this is something I really love empowering my clients with where even if the opportunity doesn't seem very visible in front of you, does not mean that it's not there. Like it is yours for the taking, and you play a role in your career trajectory to create that opportunity, to build the business case to get you there, to help the key decision makers internally to see the value of a certain role possibly being created or whatnot. But also, even much in the day to day, where how we handle certain exchanges, how we respond to certain people, maybe how we're handling conflict, right?
mm,
How we're overcoming challenges, the goals that we set and how we follow through on them, how we actually advocate for ourselves. Like this
yep.
is a really big one that doesn't just come tied to career growth conversations, but also in taking credit for our work and acknowledging our wins. And this I get a lot of questions around, whether I'm extroverted or introverted, like, does that make a difference? And of course, there's nuances here, but I love working with everyone and anyone, whether extroverted or introverted, because it's ultimately about using these strategies to help make it very natural for you. I never want anyone to feel uncomfortable with what it takes to advance their growth. It's all about making it work for you, but you'll be very surprised at how much can happen and how much can change in a short amount of time with the right level of focus and strategy. And it's a very much a combination of the day-to-day instances that I go a lot more
Mhm.
granularly in within my program, but also how that plays into the bigger picture and closing those gaps along the way and front loading a lot of the insights that are needed to close the gap to your next steps or whatever
Good.
that next step might look like.
Love
Yeah.
it. So, what are some of the common themes you're seeing with your clients? That's an aha moment for them
Mm.
when you're coaching them through this. Is everyone saying, "Oh wow, I am taking too much on," or "Oh wow, yeah, I'm not speaking up for myself." What does that look like? What have you noticed?
Yeah. I'll say there's probably a few. The
Hmm
first one is when they have the mindset shifts, because like I
Mm,
said at the beginning, the mindset is going to be your biggest asset when fueled right. And so when they're having those realizations of limiting beliefs that they've actually been holding on to and they didn't realize in the way it was impacting them, but through the way I coach on this and the exercises that I pair with it, it really helps enlighten the exploration around those limiting beliefs and how they can be quite limiting.
mm,
And so that's often a really breakthrough moment for my clients. And the awesome part is that, those limiting beliefs are different for everyone, but it's this transformation of liberating yourself from it. And it's not to say that they go away overnight, but it's at least about being empowering with tools to not let them take you over anymore and take that control back. So that's definitely a key theme. I would say another key theme within my program and some of the aha moments are really how to lead career path dialogues,
mm.
right? I think it's logical in a way to think, okay, I probably should have these conversations. I probably should book my boss or do XYZ, but it's another thing to really know how to do it. And that's where I think I could keep you on here for another 5 hours to share more, but it's really the how. And I love breaking this down in a very tangible, actionable, and digestible way. It's something that is going to help you drive the needed action to actually make it happen and customize it to your own needs. So that's often a really big aha moment for my clients of learning how to do that for themselves. And I'd say the other one, to your point, is a lot around the work-life balance and how to
Mm.
prioritize themselves and still achieve what they want. And I can tell you, all of my clients have achieved the goals that they wanted with the program, and they took care of themselves. Like they actually, scaled back on some of the bad habits that they had and changed them to better habits that help them accelerate their growth and achieve their goals a heck of a lot faster. And that's a really empowering feeling as an individual, as a professional, but just as a human, to know that, hey,
Mhm.
I'm actually able to take better control and take care of myself in this way and still achieve what I want. So I would definitely say that those are some of the top three themes that really come through.
I like that because I think what you said there with how to lead the career path dialogue, that seems to be one of the highest important pieces simply because you talked about clarity too for yourself. So we can have clarity for our career, but the company may not have a clarity and career path for us,
Mhm.
right? So
Yeah.
leading those discussions, because I've rarely hear that talked about. It's always us having clarity. Okay, this is what I need to know. Okay, coming into it, but then the company may like, no, we expect you to be here for 30 years in the same role, right?
Mhm.
It's like,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And one of the
Yeah.
things I've learned from in my prior experience working for Amazon is one of their principles is own your own, own your own development,
Yeah.
right?
I love that about
Don't
Amazon.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they were pretty adamant in saying, "Hey, don't expect your manager to come to you and say, hey, what do you want to do next?' Is you
Mm,
better lead that conversation and lead it frequently." So, um,
yeah.
how granular do you get without giving away the secret sauce around that particular topic in your signature program?
Yeah. I mean, we go pretty deep into it because
Hmm.
at the end of the day, there's a certain cadence that I normally like to recommend to have these
Hmm.
types of conversations and what needs to be discussed, how to structure those conversations, what the follow-up needs to be. And I guess the best way that I'll put it, Orlando, is it's about having a continuity of dialogue. I
Mm.
don't want anyone who's listening today to walk away that, okay, having one conversation a year is good. I'm set. It has to be a continual dialogue. And it's a little bit, like you said, a lot of the philosophy that Amazon seemed to get behind as well. But there's many things that you can do in between those moments that's going to help you build up the right kind of track record, personal brand, communication skills, all of that, and focus
Hmm.
to help you in the conversations when they come up. Because the worst thing that can happen is you're doing this conversation and you're not prepared for it, or you don't really have the right type of backing or data or foundation to actually support your cause. And then it's just a conversation for the sake of having a conversation. So, this is what I kind of mean, that there's a lot more to it than just having a conversation. We need to make sure that the roadmap you're building for yourself, what happens prior to that, following that, and everything is lining up really nicely to get you the proper alignment and buy-in. And maybe just to add one last point on that, Orlando, to what you shared
Hmm.
earlier. Yeah, maybe some companies have in mind what that trajectory looks like for a certain role, or maybe they expect people to be in a certain role for a certain amount of time. And even the company I worked for, it kind of had that same kind of mindset where you would typically be in a role for a certain amount of time before moving. But the philosophy I like to bring is it's good to have that knowledge so you
Hmm.
know kind of what you're working with, but there's absolutely ways to still accelerate that so that you can make it happen for you sooner than later. That's really the goal. And maybe it's not going to be in 3 months, but hey, if it could be within a year instead of 2 years, well, let's make it happen for you within a year, right? So I think it's all about also knowing what's really important for you as an employee. And I'd say maybe this is the last kind of big aha moment that my clients get through my program, which is really understanding what drives them in their career and how to use those insights to fuel these types of conversations. So they're really well understood, they're best supported towards their goals, and they're able to really spearhead the steps that are going to help motivate them and energize them the most to feel a very fulfilled career in their path.
Hmm. Love it. So one last question, and I wish I would have spent more time on personal branding. So you're absolutely going to have to come back.
I'm happy to, Orlando. Say, name the date, I'll be there.
Absolutely. So, what are some quick things that we didn't touch on? What are some blind spots that we were not aware of around personal branding that'll help us accelerate up promotion?
Oh, yeah. I think the big one is expecting people to know who we are and that they're just going to recognize our efforts. Like, that's a huge blind
Huge,
spot.
huge.
I used to be guilty of it too. And then I was like, what the heck is happening? I don't understand. I'm working my tail off. And I thought, I was doing a good job here. And then fast forward to some years later, when suddenly a promotion that I got, and one of the ones I mentioned earlier, came to me proactively from an entire different division that I didn't even realize knew as much as who I was. I talked with them very briefly at one point, and it's
Hmm.
part of some of the things that I shared earlier. And I guess I was top of mind for them to make a divisional change, which was very atypical at the moment, to go from where I was to that particular division of my organization. So it just shows the power of, staying too focused in your own lane and just hoping
Hmm.
for the best, fingers crossed, people are going to recognize my stuff, to actually leveraging personal branding to get away from that blind spot, that very dangerous blind spot, and taking the level of initiative for people to understand who you are, what you do, the impact that you create, so that you don't fall into that trap. That's
That's
a big
good.
one.
I would say take the Hollywood approach. Even actors have to go on a press tour, right, to push. And they're already famous, but they still got to hit the ground, do the
That's
campaign
right.
run to
Keep it top
promote
of mind.
themselves.
Keep it top of
Exactly.
mind. Yeah.
Oh man, so time has flown by. So I would say, Tiffany, thank you so much
Oh.
once again for your expertise. But share with folks the best way they could connect with you.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I love connecting. So there's a few different ways. Obviously, if you're watching this on LinkedIn, feel free to reach out to me, to the Human Career Strategy Coach. Send me a DM or a connection request. I'd be happy to speak with you and let me know that you tuned into tonight's session with Orlando and myself. If you're more active on Instagram, that's a great place to DM me. So at tiffany.human, and shoot me a message again. Let me know that you were tuning in here. Or if you prefer the more personal route as well, feel free to email me at tiffanyhuman@tiffanyhuman.com. Of course, you can do this through my website as well, www.tiffanyhuman.com. But if you want to just cut that and email me directly, tiffanyhuman@tiffanyhuman.com is a great way to go. So yeah, that would probably be the best routes to get in touch with me directly. And I hope you do. I'd love to chat with you more.
Absolutely. Let's not forget, if you want, you can reach back behind you, grab a book, talk about the book
Oh,
briefly.
yeah, sure. Hang on.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm excited about this. So, this was a book that I co wrote with a fellow career coach, Luki Denucarniato, and then three other experts in different fields outside of career, actually.
Wow.
And this is a project, speaking of the power of relationships, right? I mean, I mentioned this in the book in the initial section, but the co author, Luki, and myself, we actually met at a conference that we were participating at as guest panelists, a university conference in Canada. And he also was focusing more around young professionals. That was my focus at the time as well. It's grown since then to overall, ambitious professionals from around the world. But I still have a real soft spot for young professionals because that's ultimately what inspired me to become a career strategy coach in the first place. And so this book is all about stuff I wish I knew earlier, living your career potential. And you can almost consider it as an adulting 101. So, of course, Lukey and myself dive into the majority of the career content in the book as two fellow career coaches. But my other co-authors, Paulson, Shalini, and Dave, talk other areas of our life, right? Whether it's financing, investing, mental health, physical
Mm,
health, relationships, hard, soft skills. Like there's so much goodness in this. And it's available now on Amazon. So you're able to buy it in hard copy, paperback, Kindle, which is probably the most accessible for the audience tuning in to get it via Amazon directly. So, yes, if you'd like to support the book, I would be so grateful. It's honestly a really fun read, super digestible, oriented a little bit more for young professionals between 20 to 30 years old. But again, anyone can
that's good.
benefit from this read. It's really anecdotal as well. So it keeps things very exciting.
Love it, love it, love it. What last question is what's your personal mantra? What gets you going every day?
Oh my gosh. I think it's a big one for me. Well, okay, I have two. The one that I live by within my coaching is take control of your career success. That's just
Hmm.
something that I remind myself of every day. I remind my clients of every day that this is your career. No one is going to lead that for you. You have to lead that ship yourself. But I think for me is just ultimately, it's not so much a mantra, just connecting with my mission daily, which
Hmm.
is impacting people. Like for me, it's never really about the numbers. It's just knowing that I'm giving back in the way that I really hope to in this world. It's the part of my corporate work that I always loved was impacting and growing my team. So the fact that I'm privileged enough to get to do this every day, I wake up every day, I have my family supporting me and I'm able to work with incredible professionals from around the world, support my following, right? They might not be my clients, but I'm just so happy that they appreciate my content and the types of messages that I'll get of how I'm supporting them is the most fulfilling work I've ever done in my life. So it's not so much a mantra, but just something I constantly remind myself of and something I'm extremely grateful for. So it's the natural adrenaline that I need every day, Orlando. I'm not a coffee drinker. I don't need the coffee anyways. This is enough to get me going.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you so much again, Tiffany, for your consistency, for your humor. And
Oh,
if you go over to our IG, you'll see what I'm talking about. But it's humor with validated content that is crucial. So absolutely follow Tiffany, get the
thank you.
book, share, ask questions. I'm sure, she has a wealth more to share with you. Get into the program if you're looking to accelerate your promotion this year. But again, I thank you so much for accepting the invitation
Mm.
and continuing again our relationship and getting on the stage together on different platforms and sharing some additional content. I'm going to close this
Oh.
out with a quick video. Yes. Any
I
last
just
month?
I just wanted to say thank you, Orlando. This has been so much fun. I'm so happy that you reached out for this, and I hope the audience found it really useful as well.
Absolutely. They better had.
There are a lot of gems dropped tonight, so I'd be
Exactly.
surprised if it was a
Exactly.
no.
If not, they'll catch the replay. But thank you again so much. I'm going to close this out real quick and then we'll chat briefly afterwards.
Sounds great.